it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce the Gregor Wegberg, Mr. Gregor Wegberg, of Oneconsult International CSIRT, who is responsible for digital forensics and incident response. And let me help welcome the Gregor. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, great. Thank you very much that you even spent the time with me after the great party yesterday. So I went home quite early to be fit and also to not lose my voice because the first day was quite hard. I don't want to go into too much detail about myself. If you want, you can just Google me, Bing me, or DuckDuckGo me. On LinkedIn, there's all the information you need and maybe a bit more. Just a small fun fact, and I want to tell you 2 fun facts about myself. First, I have 3 passports or citizenships, and if you're interested and want to guess which ones, feel free to catch me after the talk. Let me be clear, I'm not a spy, even if it looks maybe that way. And the second thing is, I'm part of a CSIRT that supports different kinds of customers, SMEs, up to large multinational organizations, doing incident response and digital forensics. So we are basically some kind of CSIRT as a service or a retainer, whatever you call it in your country. And we do a lot of ransomware nowadays. It started with basically just digital forensic and internal threat actors, and nowadays it's just weekly, here a ransomware, there a ransomware. And I want to really talk about these major incidents and what we've learned from them. You see here on the picture a small image with one guy not being obfuscated, basically. That's a team member of mine, so I'm allowed to show him. This is a picture of a simpler time. This is the time where we handled Emotet, Ryuk, and TrickBot. We just had to know these 3 malware strains, basically, in Switzerland, and it was enough. Here you see a picture of an IT service provider that got hit by all 3 malwares. And the IT service provider is in the space of healthcare. So they did the IT environments for lots of hospitals and university clinics. And one thing I want to show you with this picture is the most important part are people. In my experience, there is not much to learn about the technical side because we already know a lot about this. We have a lot of presentations at this conference and so on, and the hard part are people. And one quite interesting thing that we learned in this case is that it really makes sense to print out a piece of paper and write war room on it. And then you take that piece of paper and put it on the door. Once you do that, for some reason, it's quite magical. Higher-ups, management, board members, and so on, start to spend money, start to listen to you, and they start to basically do what you recommend. Before we did that, it was only the 4th day, before we did that, we had to fight for on every step of the way. So we had to fight for, okay, we need to limit connectivity. We have to shut down systems. It was a no-go. Once we put that paper up, everything was possible for some reason. So if you stumble upon this challenge, I highly recommend to put such a piece of paper on the door. It works.
Recording
and we do
in
it
progress.
Nowadays at every incident
Recording
where we are on
stopped.
site. I hope you're familiar with these graphics. Once ISO 27035 incident response management, or also the usual incident response flow. If you remember what you've learned about them, it's always very important that at the end you do a lessons learned, or learn lessons, how it's called now by ISO. And this is one of the most important things to do. And as you see in the quote, this is also the one that most often is omitted. And this is our also own experience. So we started to plan a monthly lessons learned meeting to make sure that we talk on a monthly basis about all the past incidents and only the really big ones, the hard ones, the ones that go into get publicly well known. We do our own lessons learned meeting. And we did one small mistake, and we are still doing it, to be honest. We put that meeting on a Friday afternoon. Great. Some of you know already what the mistake is. So it's a bad idea to put a meeting on Friday afternoon, especially if you handle major incidents, ransomware cases, because you get usually called on a Friday afternoon. So we did it for a year now, and we still didn't have one meeting where more than 50% of our team was available and participated. So our lessons learned are somewhat not very useful nowadays. And we are now thinking about moving it to a Monday morning, which is usually also a bad idea. So it's a bit hard to find a clear date where we should do this meeting. But again, for you to take away, please find a time slot where you do your lessons learned and discuss all the incidents that happened. Start with the big ones, start with the hard ones, and then move forward up to the ones that you solved with a simple automated playbook or whatever. But make sure you have a time slot reserved to really learn from your incidents. And it's so simple. If I tell you it's, well, obviously, yeah. But most teams I know of, they don't do that. And as I've mentioned, I'm not going to talk about the technical side of our work. To be very honest, once you did participate in some SANS training, or you did some of the Blue Team Level 1 stuff, or similar lectures or courses online or at the university, you know enough on the technical side. Of course, if you would use another tool, for instance, Hayabusa is something that we really love, Velociraptor, we love it, they make you more efficient, and your instance also get basically solved quicker. But the thing that really takes a lot of time, the thing that really increases the impact of an incident are people. And if we go to a customer on site and try to start helping him or her or them with their incident, this is what we find on site usually. Most people are not familiar with handling and resolving and responding to major incidents, and they feel very overwhelmed. This is, if you look at this picture, I think you have a feeling of drowning, of being scared, and this is exactly what those people usually feel. And one of the important parts is that you find someone in your team that is really good at communicating, at feeling what others feel, and use that person to basically get your customer or your team members, colleagues, whoever you help, out of this situation. So they are no longer scared. They start to think clearly again, methodically again. It is quite common for us to get on-site, and most people are just sitting around and doing nothing. This is one kind of customer. They are just in shock. And the second kind of customer is usually like lots of headless chicken. They just run around. And this is even worse. They have IT people that start doing stuff because they know what to do. IT people are the worst in our line of work. We have really to stop them. They do great work afterwards, but in the first hours, they start to do things out of order, out of their usual processes, so they just change stuff with their domain administrator. They just log in everywhere with their domain administrator. They just change firewall rules and so on. It's really crazy. And because they are I assume they are scared. That's my assumption, but maybe they are not scared. They just think they know what to do. If you talk to them afterwards and ask them, okay, what did you do already? They already forgot it because it was in the moment. They just did something. And this increases the time you take to resolve an incident by quite a lot. So we've had a few cases where the Active Directory or domain controls were not compromised yet. And we could prove by doing some digital forensics that the domain controller was compromised because IT administrators started using their domain administrator on all kinds of devices, no longer separating and using a trusted workstation. And this led to basically running mimikatz and stealing that credential. So this slide is hard to swallow, to be honest, for most people. I do it myself only maybe every fifth or sixth case, is to really arrive on site and take everyone I find and say, let's go take a break. If you have a major incident, and let's think about ransomware, there's really no reason to speed things up. You really have to slow things down. Usually, most of the stuff already happened. So in Switzerland, for us, it's quite, if we know it's a ransomware because we see a ransom note, we know it's one of the big crime organizations that has also a site on the darknet, well, the data is already stolen. If the backup is still up, it will very likely stay up in our experience. If it's already compromised, well, it's compromised. So let's go and take a break, because we really need to slow things down and start to think clearly, start to think methodologically. I myself recommend water, not coffee and tea because of the caffeine and so on, but most people drink something. And this is, again, something that I had to learn basically due to my own mistakes. So here are some things that people need. You need sustenance. You have to drink something, to eat something. You have to take naps and sleep a bit to recover. And ideally, you also take showers. It's quite hard for some people to visit the war room after a few days because most of the people in there didn't take showers in the past few days. And the person that arrives there, usually a board member, well, they just arrived from home. And again, it's obvious. But in my experience, in my personal experience, so the very first picture with the people in the same room, in the war room, this is a case where I didn't sleep for 3 days. Well, I slept 2 hours during a 3-day period. And there are notes of meetings, there are even recordings of meetings where I see what I've started to talk about, how I started to think. And it's quite scary to realize that I was responsible to make sure as the incident manager that hospitals don't have to shut down because of a ransomware attack. And I didn't sleep for 3 days, and I started to do very stupid things. I couldn't even walk straight anymore. But I didn't realize it myself. So there was no one else who saw that and reacted and told me, hey, Gregor, take a break. Go to sleep. Drink something, eat something. Please, make sure that you take someone in such a major incident. Usually you have a lot of people that don't have any work to do right now because everything basically comes to a standstill, the systems don't work, so usually you have people that don't really have a job. Take them and tell them to make sure that everyone has a glass of water at their table. Make sure they drink that. Make sure that everyone gets something to eat to their workstation. Because usually it's quite hard to make sure that they move away from the workstation, go to the cafeteria and eat something. Delegate that work to someone else so you have the free time, but you are also sure everyone has necessary pauses, breaks, and sustenance. And this is something that you should really do in the first 12 hours ideally. So there were some presentations showing really great graphics how you can plan your incident response. What do you do in the first 12? So what are the immediate measures? What do you do in the first 12 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours? So something to do in the first 12 hours to really think about who is working when and who is taking a break when. And really make sure that everyone knows that they have to follow that plan. If you don't do that, your incident response will take much longer. So I don't have the numbers because I'm bad at statistics, but I have the gut feeling that if we do that, we have at least spend 2 weeks less doing incident response than if we just do a freestyle, let's see who stays, who goes home, and so on. And I think you know, digital forensic incident response is hard. I think that's not really new to you. You know we have to combine different tools, different sources of information, do threat intelligence, threat hunting, incident response, incident management, crisis management, and we are not even talking about communication, PR, and so on. And something that's surprisingly hard again, people just, I think you would all agree with me, humans make mistakes. in this situation, because you're relaxed, you're sitting here, you just had a great night, I hope a good cup of coffee. But in the moment, people start to forget that humans make mistakes. They don't plan for it, first mistake, and if a mistake happens, they get really, really angry. Don't get angry at people during an incident. That's a really bad idea. Again, obviously, but it happens a lot because everyone is stressed. So this is a topic that I talk to higher management during, basically, usually in the first 24 hours. I really take them with me to do a break and talk to them. Okay, just that's clear. What will happen? You have only 50% of your staff available, and they work at 50% efficiency. You have to accept this. If you can't accept this, let's stop doing any work, because it will go wrong. The impact will be much worse. And I see this collapse quite a lot. It's especially for higher management, it's always in the first 2 hours, okay, what happened? We need to do the GDPR announcement. Okay, we have to call someone, we have to inform our customers, and so on and so on. So they only add pressure, but don't really help removing pressure. And once you add pressure, mistakes happen again much more. And every mistake during an incident could make the whole thing much worse. It's not unseen that during an incident, because of a mistake, the whole available backups get destroyed. Luckily it was a small company, but we saw them thinking they pushed the button for restore, but they pushed the button for approving the final delete. I don't know how that happened, because humans make mistakes, but this is a problem. And the typical mistakes we handle is we also support a cyber insurer, so we have quite a lot of calls from people with small companies asking us for help. And one very common call is a Tesla that broke down on the road. And because Teslas are basically computers with 4 wheels, they think, okay, that's a cyber problem, that's a cyber attack. And they call us up. And now we have different ways to go. We can be nice to them, ask a few questions to make sure maybe this is the one, this is the cyber attack against a Tesla. Would be great blog post and PR for our company. But much more important is that we stay nice to the people, because of course, it's not very likely nowadays. And yeah, you're calling basically the wrong number, but we can stay nice, we can ask questions and make sure that the person would call again. Because next time they have a real case, they will call us, won't call us because they think, well, last time they didn't help and were not really interested. So be very careful as incident responders and in general security people. If someone reports to you something, try to give them a gift. Try to really say thank you, because this is a person that you can use as a sensor, a human sensor. Much more interesting than a human firewall, to be honest. And this is a question I also have to ask in the first, usually 48 hours. Why are we even trying to resolve the issue? Why do we do incident response? It would be much easier and less costly to just shut down the company and stop working. So we really have to think about why. Because behind the why, we learn, okay, which system is the important one, so the companies can start having revenue again. Why do we help that company? Do we want that it survives tomorrow so people still have work tomorrow? Or is it just to test our new Velociraptor threat hunt? Why do we do the incident response? And this is a question that you have to ask the whole hierarchy to really understand what the right approach to incident response is. I see a lot of, again, usually IT people restoring systems that no one cares about, but they care about it. So it's quite common for the IT professionals to restore their Nagios for service monitoring. But there is no other service running to monitor. Maybe we have to restore the SAP system, but well, that's a huge thing. Is it really the important one, or do we have to restore maybe the voice over IP systems to make sure that we can call our customers and inform them what happened? So asking why do we do and what do we do? It's really important. And you need to make that time. Stop running around. Stop doing stuff. First, really understand what's your goal. Have a strategy. Have something that you aim for. And associated with that, and this is, again, a real case in Switzerland. I hope I obfuscated it enough. Otherwise, please let me know, so I can call the customer that he has another incident again. This is how we like and love to work. This is before COVID, of course. We love to use pen and paper. Digital tools are great. But in such a dynamic, agile environment, we love to work with pen and paper, because here I can write a task down on a piece of paper. I can categorize, organize, and also give it to a person into their hand and say, you're working only on this thing, nothing else. And once you're done, you come back and tell us what you did, because it's very likely you forgot something. This works great. Once we started doing incident response during COVID with Microsoft Teams, Miro boards, and so on, everything just slowed so much down. It was so inefficient. You had data loss during the incident, and you didn't know what you planned, and so on. It was quite hard. But again, this is, of course, more for a local situation. And in this case, we realized, okay, the Post-its, these small pieces of paper, they are great, but on the second day, we realized it didn't really work for that customer, so we started using more flip charts where you just had boxes to tick off. It's really interesting to find out what works for your organization. This is a great approach for tabletop exercises if you want to focus, okay, how do we document, how do we plan, how do we assign tasks? This is an interesting thing to try out and find out. I highly recommend to read up on all the agile software development and project management methods. So Kanban boards are a great tool for incident response, in my opinion, because they really encapsulate the whole thing, that you can only work on some amount of tasks at any point in time, that you need to track the status, and so on. Oh, I love the ransomware playbook. If I come to you and try to help you with a ransomware case, and you tell me, well, it's all good, we have a ransomware playbook. Great. But if that ransomware playbook is not a book, but just a two-sided piece of paper, I assume it's worthless. Most playbooks for ransomware that we see are very, very high level. They basically summarize everything that we usually have to do. It's basically the incident response process with some additional details. I would highly recommend to you to think more on smaller, more modular playbooks. So, as you know, NIST recommends that we don't change our passwords just all 6 months, so something like that. But they also say, if you assume that the credentials are compromised, you have to reset them. Well, who of you has the playbook to reset all credentials in your organization? I'm talking about passwords for service accounts, APIs, secrets, whatever you have, SSH keys, and so on. Usually no one, or at least not for everything, of course, because that's hard. But this is something that you can start thinking about, write a playbook for, and this is something that you will need in every case basically in every incident response case of some major size. And why I recommend that is, again, quite simple, because if you have a major incident, you have the time to think about, okay, how do I work on this ransomware case? But if your people have to think, how do we reset and all our credentials, and where do we even have them stored? This is a much harder question to solve during an incident. So I highly recommend, if you do playbooks for major incidents, basically once your gut has the feeling that something is wrong, make sure you have a playbook. What do you do in case of immediate measures? So I usually tell people to write a playbook for the first hour after your gut feeling changed and you have the feeling that something is wrong. What do you do? How do you protect your critical systems? What do you shut down? What are you allowed to shut down, etc.? So the first hour is very interesting. And then again, resetting passwords. Everything else is not. We have, again, the time to discuss that during the incident, because one part will be working on digital forensics. The other part is already preparing our new environment where we will rebuild everything, and you will have a few people that can think about the next few steps during the incident. And serious incidents really take their time. You have to realize that, and this basically combines everything that I've told you. This is the reason why you can take breaks and should take breaks. This is the reason why you have to talk to senior management and make sure that you have enough people, the right people, that you know why you are doing incident response and so on. Because if you're doing a major incident response case or ransomware nowadays, of course, we are talking about weeks. And if we're talking about weeks, we can also take 8 hours to sleep without a problem. If it takes 2 or 3 days more, it really doesn't matter that much. Again, sorry for being blunt, but that's reality for me. So that's what I want to give you on your journey. Please think about the people, and don't forget, even if the worst thing happened, even if the shit hit the fan, you will be okay. I know it because we do it quite a lot. If you want to connect with me or ask any questions, you have now a bit of time. And otherwise, feel free to use one of the social handles. I'm not that active, but I'm reacting to messages at least. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you very much, Gregor, for a great presentation based on your real experience. Appreciate it. Now we have a little bit more than 5 minutes for questions and answers. And where's the microphones?
You have to shout.
Oh, okay. I can't find any microphones, but if you have any questions, shout up or come up here. Oh, yes.
Great presentation. Just a quick question. In that first hour of crisis, when you really don't know what's happening, what would be your recommendation? What's the first step you recommend?
Yeah. So the question is, what is my recommendation for the first hour when you don't really know what happened, basically? I'm a big fan of thinking about my gut feeling. So if I have a bad gut feeling, I have to start doing the first hour starts for me. So I don't wait for everything being for sure encrypted, for instance. So I try with my customers to always think about, okay, once someone in security has a bad gut feeling, what are they allowed to do? So ideally, can we shut down the internet connection? For universities, this is possible usually. Can we disconnect our backup systems so they are no longer, so lateral movement to them is hindered? That could be something that you can do. And always also with the approach, so okay, how long can we keep that this way? So my idea is always in the first hour you want to do things that buy you time, again, to take a break, but also to start thinking, okay, what's happening, what makes sense, and so on. So I would highly recommend to think, not assume, okay, we will know what happened, but to assume, okay, we have no idea, we have a bad feeling, what can we, knowing the MITRE ATT&CK framework, basically, what is allowed, how long, and so on. So I would focus on that, to be honest, yeah.
I got a microphone for you, not for me. So next question, raise your hand, and I'll be there.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I think it's really important. Regarding the stress relief for the incident responders, do you have any suggestions? I've heard about companies that are offering, like they're ordering pizza or offering hotel coupons or offering to pay for taxi, so people don't have to drive home themselves. Do you have any more suggestions which resources companies could prepare?
So ideally, you have someone in higher management that does all the things, so pays for taxi, buys pizza, because this really is usually unknown and not common, so people really love that, and this somehow also relaxes them. So in one case, I bought everyone a meditation app and asked them to meditate, so basically doing breathing exercises, but this was a bit too weird for most of them, to be honest. So it's really what you already told. So buy pizza, make sure that's not only pizza, so maybe something more healthy for people that are a bit more conscious about their health. Make sure you have sodas for the people that love sugary stuff, but also water, coffee. Basically, make sure you have a buffet. And it's just a case of going there and putting things on your plate.
Okay, here's one quick update. There are 2 microphones set thanks to the great AV technicians. Thank you very much for your quick actions. And now you can either line up in front of the microphone or let me run for you. Either way. Next question. Are you so tired after the reception? Make your brain work. Oh, yeah, either way. You want me to run?
No, all good, thank you. In terms of internal and external comms, do you see a need for dedicated people to be dedicated just to focus on comms? Mm-hmm. Can it be a side task?
It's usually a side task, sadly, and this is a very, 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 very bad idea. You really need professionals that know how to do crisis communication. So if you are a company organization of some relevant size, so you're usually not an SME, please call crisis communication experts and don't ask your incident responders or your IT people to do it themselves or provide you guidance. To be honest, I usually have a slide about that a ransomware attack is not something that is a problem for IT. It's a problem for the whole organization, so everyone is required to participate, and for that reason, if you want to do PR, you have to do PR, basically you have to communicate. Get crisis communicators that are experienced with cyber attacks. There are some around. I know that in North America there are more, in Switzerland there are a bit less that do that. Yeah. It's well-spent money, to be honest. So I even would go so far to tell you it's easier, get one crisis communicator and send someone from my team home. I think that makes more sense, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, let me take one last question. You want me to run?
Thank you for a great talk. Do you have any suggestions as to the discipline in the war room for communication when, I assume you don't allow management to run in and ask statuses. So what kind of regime do you run there?
It's hard to answer because it really depends on how the building is structured and where the meeting rooms are and so on. So usually I try to make sure that the first room that someone from management passes is where the incident manager and coordinator sits. And the people that really do the work, they are ideally hidden and he doesn't even, or she doesn't even know where they are. We did that once. It was not received very well first, but it worked. It's really about teaching the person, hey, these are the 2 people you are allowed to talk to and not to them. And really to observe, so sometimes I do the whole day, just follow the guy that is responsible, basically the CEO usually, and make sure that he doesn't talk to anyone he shouldn't talk. But that's teaching. It really depends also on the manager, if he can handle this or not. If they can't handle it, well, then they will pay more for the incident response, basically. Yeah. But I didn't find the silver bullet yet.
Okay, its time is up. But Gregor, thank you very much for your great presentation.